Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Identity Theft and Fraud. This is our second webinar of the Get Savvy, Grow Your Green Stuff webinar series for 2021-2022. Hopefully everybody is in. We just let everybody in from the waiting room. If you are not familiar with how we run these webinars, I just want to let you know we are recording this so we can make this recording available later. So don't fret if your internet gets connected or you need to leave early, that's fine. We'll send you the recording afterwards, as well as all of the resources that we share in the chat. We do want to make sure that everyone can hear the presenters today. So if you can just put in the chat, if you can hear me, that would be really helpful for us. We'll go relatively quickly. So we have multiple people in the chat making sure to help you troubleshoot any issues that you run into. Oh, thank you so much. So many people can hear us, so that's excellent. My name is Andrea Pellegrini, and I run the Student Money Management Center for the University of Illinois System, and I am joined today by my colleague, Nikki. Nikki, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Nikki Jankola-Shanks. I'm the Director of External Affairs and Student Loan Policy at the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, otherwise known and better known as IDFPR.
Thank you so much, Nikki. So because all of the Get Savvy, Grow Your Green Stuff webinar team represents organizations kind of across the state of Illinois, we want to do a land acknowledgement. So collectively, as I said, the Get Savvy webinar team represents organizations across the state of Illinois, which rest on the ancestral lands of multiple Native nations, including the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Wea, Miami, Mascoutin, Ottawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasha tribes. So we just want to acknowledge that we have a role in helping these Native nations and to work with them as we move forward as a vibrant, inclusive society. So since we're in Illinois, we do want to know kind of where you're logging in from. We've had people from across the United States and even people from Canada and other countries join us. But if you can put in the chat where you're logging in from today, that would help us kind of find out geographically what our reach is. We got people from Virginia and Iowa, lots of Illinois, New York, Wisconsin, lots of Illinois. That's good. We target Illinois, so it's good to see so many Illinois people today. Keep them coming. We got a lot of stuff to go over. So I do want to talk about our learning objectives just really quickly. We are talking about identity theft, as I mentioned when we first logged on. We want to help you understand terminology related to identity theft, fraud, and scams. We want to help you kind of identify ways to protect your identity, both online and in real life. We'll be going over a few ways to recognize how to avoid different types of fraud and scams that exist. And we'll discuss how organizations use data and some of the risks of data breaches, since those are we're more aware of them. They're happening all the time. So, and then we also want you to understand the roles and responsibilities that you have in protecting your own personal data. So those are the kinds of things that we'll be talking about today. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We have lots of people monitoring the chat to try to get you answers quickly. You don't have to wait until the end if you have any questions. So, if anybody's been here before, you know we like to use the chat a lot. So who do you think is most at risk of becoming a victim of identity theft? If you can put that in the chat. And Nancy, the slides will be shared, and Petrobus, if you can put not Petrobus, Brooke, if you can share the link to the PDF of the slides as well, again, that would be really helpful. All right, lots of answers here. Everyone, anyone, old people, everyone, senior citizens, anyone. So it's kind of swaying more towards senior citizens as well. So who do you think is most at risk? It's actually younger people. younger people tend to report losing money to fraud, according to the Federal Trade Commission, more often than older people. So that 44% of fraud reports made in 2020 were from people between ages 20 to 29. And only 20% were from people between ages 70 to 79, where you might think that I'm so sorry, Nikki, you're right. So I'm sorry. Nikki will follow it up with age and fraud.
No worries.
I was on a roll. Sorry, guys.
So like Andrew was saying, it's a common misconception that older people are usually the targets of fraud, but that's actually not true. You could see here that their median losses in terms of dollars is higher, but the actual number of fraud reports is much low, for people who are 20 to 29, 44% to 20%. So I'm sure there's a whole host of reasons as to why that can be. But as we go through, we'll talk about what are some of the more common types of scams and things online that could contribute to these numbers. All right, so these are some other things from the Federal Trade Commission from 2020. $306 was the median lost. 1 in 5 people lost money to some sort of imposter scam, and we will go through what an imposter scam is a little bit later. But take a look at this last number. There was a 2,917% increase in government benefit identity theft. That number is insane. So that's going to be a lot that we'll talk about due to some COVID-19 related scams specifically. The 1 in 5 people, the median loss was actually $850 to imposter scams as well. So, all right, we're going to go through some of the common theft and fraud terms. So this is kind of how a flow chart of identity theft kind of works, I would say. So identity theft and identity fraud are both interchangeable terms used to refer to all types of crime in which someone wrongfully obtains and uses another person's personal data in some way that involves fraud or deception. Usually that means for economic gain. As we go through some different examples, there's also some that I feel like do this as a part of disruption, things like that as well. Recovering from an identity theft can be, depending on the level, very challenging. It doesn't always have a long-lasting impact on your finances, but it could maybe impact your reputation or your credit score or something like that. So, someone takes your personal info, they use it without permission, and then it can damage finances, credit history, reputation, and a whole host of things. So there are lots of fraud categories, and because we have a lot of slides to get through today, I'm not going to talk about each of these in super depth. I'm just going to highlight a few. Some of these I'm sure you're already aware of. So imposter scams is very common, as the slides previous noted. Imposter scams means that somebody is pretending to be somebody else to get information from you. So that could be, hey, I'm calling from, your car company and your car warranty is out. Hey, you may get an email that looks like it's from, some subscription that you have, etc. That, they're pretending, being an imposter, you're pretending to be somebody else to get you to reveal personal information, usually for financial gain, like we said. Then there's also a whole bunch of other ones. Like I said, I'm not going to go into huge detail on these, but business and job opportunities, anything through your telephone or mobile services, text messages, healthcare related, travel and online shopping. I kind of put those together, hey, you won a free vacation, or, negative reviews, etc. So those are all sorts of different fraud categories that may have an impact. All right, security breach. You have probably heard what this is. It's in the news, it seems like every day. But security or data breaches are when information is stolen without authorization. So, for example, one of the most concerning ones for financial information was in 2017 with the Equifax breach. And it's basically, someone hacking in, getting that type of data without, from somebody who did not have permission to have that data. So let's talk about, I'm sure, like I said, it's in the news. What other data breaches have you heard of in the last couple years?
Or months, honestly. There seems to be a new one like every week.
That's very true. You guys can just put them in the chat. Target, yep, that one was a huge one that was in there. Your hospital, I actually just had my doctor practice also was hacked. T-Mobile, yep. So just to, yep, Kathy, we'll talk about that, the unemployment services from Illinois. All right. So a few of the notable ones that you guys have probably heard of, these are just a few of the very many in more recent history. There was Yahoo in 2013, as I mentioned, Equifax in 2017, Marriott in 2014 had data of 500 million customers compromised. That was 2018. Facebook in 2019, that one was also talked about a lot, and that data breach resulted in publicized information of users in April of this year. So the hack happened in 2019, but people's information became available 2021. LinkedIn has had several data breaches, and the most recent one exposed info of 90% of their users in June of 2021. So targets of data breaches, all kinds of data can be a target. Anything that's personally identifiable information, from your name to your phone number to your address to email, etc. Of course, financial information, debit cards, credit cards, bank account numbers, health information. I know somebody mentioned in the chat, hospital got hacked, and my doctor's office did as well. Intellectual property, competition information, legal information, and IT security data. So for any of these, it could definitely damage your finances. Or if this happens to your business, it could also have a severe impact on that. Could have an impact on your credit worthiness or the reputation of consumers or the business itself. There are several consequences for both individuals and businesses. Information obtained through a data breach, whether from hackers or negligence on behalf of an organization or employee, can result in annoyances as small as changing passwords to complications with identity theft that could ruin an individual consumer's life. So all sorts of data that can happen.
It's very scary to think about how little control we have over a lot of the big data breaches, but we can talk about where we do have some control. So I'm going to talk a little bit about malware. So malware, the word malware was invented in the 1990s, and it originated from the word malicious and software. So this is a particular type of software that is specifically designed to disrupt, damage, or gain unauthorized access to a computer system. There are different types of malware, and we're going to talk about a couple of them. You might have heard of the spyware issue with the Apple phones that came out on Monday. Surprise, we were still working on the slides when that came out. So that's one type. There's also ransomware, and this one is very scary as well. So ransomware is a specific type of malware that encrypts all files on a particular device so that that device becomes inoperable. So what happens is hackers, or sometimes they're called bad actors, will then demand a ransom for the decryption or the key in order to get the files back, your data back, or to make that particular device functional again. So some entire, corporations, if their server gets impacted by a ransomware, it could shut down like their operating systems or their point of sale systems. So it's even happened to K through 12 or government agencies. It's happened to hospitals where ransomware has been used to compromise service provided through those organizations, as well as lock up all of their data. Unfortunately, even if you pay the ransom, there's not a guarantee that you're going to get that data back, because a lot of ransomware programs will have already corrupted that data. So it's not necessarily going to be useful. But there's a lot of government agencies and businesses that are set up to try to protect individual consumers and organizations from ransomware. So we'll share some resources in the chat. There's a resource called stopransomware.gov that's really all about how organizations can protect against ransomware. And part of that's training about phishing attempts, right, with your individual employees. And some of it is about just like being careful about backing up your data. And the same goes for individuals. Backing up your data is really important to protecting it. All right, so we're going to talk more about social engineering now. And what this means, specifically in the context of information security, is it's the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that may be used for fraudulent purposes. So usually this is referred to as phishing, but there are multiple types of social engineering that I'm going to talk about now. So phishing is kind of the catch-all phrase for all actions related to fraudulently obtaining sensitive information or personal information. Pharming involves using malware or malicious code on your machine to gather data about you and your activities, financial information, personal information, information about your social network so they can take on your identity, all kinds of things that pharming can be used for. Vishing is using a telephone to obtain sensitive info. So basically when you get that fake call from the IRS telling you you owe back taxes, that's a vishing attempt. Smishing is the use of text messages to get information. So you might have got a fraudulent text from like FedEx or UPS, especially last year when we started shipping a lot more stuff. There were a lot of smishing attempts to get people to click links and provide information. So that's where that comes from. And then spear phishing or whaling is when a specific person is targeted using very carefully crafted messages. They might appear from like a boss in a hurry or like a government authority that needs something. really fast, but they'll usually target a very specific person that has unique access to a lot of data. So those are just a few. And let's talk a little bit about imposter scams, because there was such a big rise in imposter scams over the past year. There's different categories of them. So you might be more familiar with like social security scams, where someone pretends to be from the Social Security Administration and they call you or they text you or they email you and say that you need to do something or provide additional information in order to qualify for Social Security, or whatever the case might be. Romance scams is very sad, but it's when basically you get catfished. If people aren't familiar with the catfish, people pretend to be someone else, and then they use the person's emotions to get them to give them money. So there's a manipulation around love there, and that's very sad. IRS imposter scams are when someone pretends to be someone from the IRS, demanding you to pay taxes or threatening you with jail time if you don't give information to them related to your taxes. There's also nanny and caregiver imposter scams. Usually this targets people that are looking for work online. So they might set up a whole online profile and say, I have a child that needs care, and if you provide information, we'll do a background check and we'll set you up as the nanny or caregiver for this person or child. So that one's also sad, because there are people that do legitimately need childcare or someone to help care for their aging parent. So those are getting harder and harder to spot as well. And then there's family emergency and grandkids scams, where the scammer pretends to be one of your family members or your grandchild and says that they need bail money, or they're stuck in another country and they need money to get out. Those are also very sad because they prey on relationships. And then there's tech support scams. So if you've ever seen a pop-up after you've been to a website, and sometimes they're like, hey, you need to contact Windows immediately. This is the support call because you have malicious code on your computer. So that's another imposter scam, where someone is pretending to be part of tech support, and then they gain information or access to your information that can be really detrimental. All right, so we talked a little bit about notable situations in history related to data breaches, but we want to talk a little bit about even more recent events. So the Colonial Pipeline was attacked with a ransomware and shut down for 6 days until they paid 75 Bitcoin, which would be about $5 million US. And that happened on May 7th, 2021. That's about when it was reported on. And it halted operations, it canceled flights, gas prices rose. So it had a really big impact for that one ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline. On May 12th, 2021, the FBI released a notification of spear phishing attempts, like we talked about earlier, directing recipients to download a fake Windows application impersonating a financial institution. So there's any length that these scammers or bad actors will go to. T-Mobile, a lot of you mentioned in the chat, is offering 2 years of identity protection services after a breach that put 40 million applicants for their services at risk. The Facebook data that was stolen in 2018 impacted 533 million users, but it wasn't publicly posted online until August of this year. So they held on to that for basically 3 years before they posted it online. And then just on Monday, Apple released an emergency update to their iOS to fix a vulnerability that allowed devices to be exploited by Pegasus software. So We put some information about the Apple one, since it's so recent, in the chat if you wanted to learn more about that one. All right, so I'm going to hand it back over to Nikki to talk about what to do when looking for scams.
There we go. So now that we kind of covered a lot of different types of scams, let's talk about what we should do or look for when it comes to scams. So in the chat, if you guys could answer, what are some scam indicators you look for? Like, what makes you think that something's fishy? Whether that be a phone call, an email, a text message, spelling. If it says it's urgent or bad English, yeah. Email address doesn't match, for sure. Check the URL. Those are all great answers. So next I'm going to kind of show you guys some real world examples of, these were actually on the FTC website. So take a look at this. Do you guys think that this is a scam, or do you think that this is legit? And for those of you saying scam, yep, from spelling. Go ahead, Andrew, if you could go to the next slide. So yes, you guys could see that this had several misspellings, but something else that we wanted to point out, it says to access the form for your refund, please click here. You really need to be careful about clicking on anything that even looks sort of suspicious, because a lot of times it's that click through that then they're able to steal information. So never click a link if you don't trust the source. All right, so then we have another example. Is this a scam or not?
This one might be a little bit harder to read, but it is a Netflix email. And it looks like it has the actual Netflix icon in it, embedded in it. It looks like it's formatted from their marketing as well.
So it is a scam, but yes, Karen, the real indicator here, the center spelling isn't, I mean, because that's the British way of spelling, like, who knows where it's coming from, but the real kicker here is that it doesn't have a name. It just says, hi, dear. So most, especially if it's something that you subscribe to, they'll be able to, your name would be automatically generated. And then also almost all vendors will not ask you to change any payment via email. So that's also something you want to look for. All right, we have one more example. Scam or not? Scam. Go ahead. Yep. So here you could definitely see that this weird beginning of a link, like that's not normal, right? So FedEx is not going to have some random link. But this became really popular in this past year for this FedEx or UPS or USPS scandals, because when people started ordering more stuff online during the pandemic, then the scams kind of shifted to their attention to those types of packages being delivered. So speaking of COVID-19, these are some of the biggest scams of COVID-19. So the first one is the vaccine cards. You've probably seen people post online, you know, hey, I got my vaccine, here's my card, you know, like a picture with their card. People were taking those pictures and getting names, creating fake vaccine cards, etc., from them. So anything that you post, if you're choosing to post that you got vaccinated that way, you need to block out all sensitive or personal information. Early access to vaccines. This is not really an issue anymore since vaccines are widely available, but when they weren't, there were a lot of scams talking about, hey, if you pay this much money, I could get you in early, etc. Charities, unfortunately, during any sort of natural disaster, from the pandemic to tornadoes to hurricanes, there's always fake charities that kind of pop up, unfortunately. So it's just something to make sure that if somebody's asking you to donate to something, that it's coming from a source you trust. The stimulus checks that got sent out were, people were trying to intercept those. There were also a lot of scams around people pretending to be the IRS or pretending to be from the federal government related directly to a stimulus check. And because stimulus checks were new, a lot of people just assumed and clicked through an email or a text message, etc. Only communicate any stimulus checks or refund checks, anything like that, directly with the IRS. Anybody else is a scam. And then we mentioned this one earlier, but the Illinois Department of Employment Security had a big breach as well. People were found, and it wasn't just Illinois. They also had problems. We obviously had a big problem here, but it was across the country as well. People were filing fake unemployment claims under people's names. It actually happened to my husband. He was still working, and his HR department notified him that somebody had tried to file an unemployment claim in his name and then start getting those checks. So that was a big one. And then this one is horrific when you think about it, but people pretended to be from the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, COVID-19 funeral assistant program. So they were targeting people who had lost somebody due to COVID-19 in order to steal their social security numbers and other personal info. So if you are a victim of any of these, what could get stolen? Literally anything. It could be your name, it could be your social security number, it could be credit cards, it could be bank accounts, it could be physical money, if it's in person, any other personal information from if you're married, if you have kids, where you went to school, whatever it might be. And so how does this happen? So it's not just limited to data breaches. All that things can get stolen. And yes, we've talked a lot about the data breaches because everything with online is so prevalent, but there are other ways it can happen. Information stolen from your trash can or a recycling bin, which is why it's really helpful to have a shredder for really sensitive financial or any type of sensitive documents. It could be stolen from the business trash. It could, if you are pickpocketed or robbed of some kind, it could take your wallet or purse. There's also the trick you into revealing information, whether that's via phone, even sometimes in person, depending where you are. And then it could be somebody pretending to offer you a job, a scholarship for school, even an apartment in order to get your personal information. So what are some things that an identity thief might do? Well, they can go on some spending sprees with your bank accounts. They could open up new accounts once they have all your information and have the statement sent to a new address. So you may not even know for a while that this is happening. They could also change your contact info on accounts, so you can't track the activity. So maybe, for example, if you have a bank account and you have a bank account and then you every day sign up to get, alerts of what's in your bank account every day, how much money, they could change it so it goes to them instead of you. People can take out other types of loans in your name, from auto to mortgages, anything, and even rent an apartment in your name if they have your information. So, as I said in the previous slide, you may not even know that you're a victim for a little bit. So what are some warning signs? Make sure you're checking your accounts regularly. And if there is a mistake or on your account or your credit report, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can look at your credit report too. Go over it, make sure that you know what's on there. If every month you get a Verizon bill and all of a sudden you're no longer getting that bill, that's highly suspicious, and you should look into that by calling the company. If you get any notice from the IRS, which is different than a scam. So a notice maybe from the IRS that you're behind on tax payment or something like that, like an actual notice from the department, that's a warning sign. If you start to get any sort of calls or emails or mail about accounts that have been opened up in your minor child's name, and calls from debt collectors for debts that you don't have, that you know of, because maybe somebody else had opened up an account in your name and stopped paying on it. And then any sort of alert from unusual activity from your personal financial institution. A lot of financial institutions, like I bank at Chase. I know Chase will send me a text message if they think that something seems off, and I could say yes or no, that was me or not. So any sort of alerts from your actual bank or financial institution, you should also pay attention to.
So I'm going to take over and talk about how to stay safe. Thank you, Nikki, for going over kind of what to pay attention to, what to look for when fraud is, you might be a victim of fraud, or fraud might be in your purview, just so we get all on the same page. And I would like to note, when we talked about IRS notice, it will always be in a physical mail form. It won't be over email or text message or Facebook. So those notices from IRS is always physical mail. That's a big notifier that it's not just a scam. All right, so let's talk about staying safe. Let's talk about social security numbers specifically. So your social security number can be used to access or change a whole lot of information. So it's really, really important to keep it safe and kind of hidden. One really good habit to get into is to not carry your social security card in your wallet. I've run into people of all ages that just carry their social security card in their wallet all the time, which it's one thing to bring it to an employer to verify for employment. It's another thing to just carry it around all the time. You want to keep it safe, locked up, and hidden when you don't actively need to use it. And if someone requests your social security number, and like they aren't your employer, you might want to ask, why do you need it? How will you be using it? And what steps do you take to protect it? Because it is such a valuable information. All right, so here's kind of our checklist for keeping information safe. So you want to keep all your important papers secure. You want to be careful with your mail, your physical mail. You want to shred sensitive documents. You might consider purchasing a micro or crosscut shredder if you don't already have one, to make sure that it is very hard for any malicious actors to go dumpster diving for your information. You also don't want to overshare on social media, either your information or that of your loved ones or significant others or friends or family, just to protect yourself and everyone you care about. You also want to lock your devices using a longer PIN number is usually better than a shorter PIN number. Just be mindful of like who you share it with. Probably don't share it. You also want to read privacy policies, limit what you carry just on an everyday basis so that you are less at risk of having information stolen or your stuff stolen or being pickpocketed. You also want to destroy prescription labels. I know that seems strange, but there's a lot of information on prescription labels. And as we mentioned earlier, people are after healthcare information too. So destroying your prescription labels can be helpful for protecting your information as well. And then you can opt out of pre-approved offers from insurance companies and from credit companies, which we put a link to in the chat. Thank you, Brooke. All right, so when it comes to creating passwords, and we have to use a password for pretty much everything now, you don't want to share your passwords or your PIN numbers for like your debit card or your credit card. You want to use unique passwords or phrases, and you don't want to reuse the same password. I know it's a lot easier to, especially with how many different accounts that we use nowadays. But if one of those accounts get compromised and it uses the same password as all your other accounts, then all of your other accounts can get compromised as well. So just having a password manager, considering using a password manager, can help you remember one password for all 30 or 50 of your different logins, and then you can have different passwords for each one of those logins. And then you don't want to share answers to security questions. I know that a couple of people in the chat talked about how on like the Facebook games or social media games that have you enter information about yourself could be scraping data about your personal history that could be used to answer your security questions and reset your passwords and get into your accounts. So those are things to really think about when you're setting up passwords. One thing about password managers, there are many of them out there. Some of them are built into services that we already use, like Apple has, I think Apple Keychain is called, Google has passwords. A lot of our browsers have password managers built into them, or they will automatically save passwords. But password managers specifically allows you to have one really long passphrase to rule all of your passwords, one ring to rule them all, one password to rule them all. Some will allow you to auto-generate passwords with unique numbers, passphrases, characters, links. If you do choose to use a password manager, you want to make sure that they're using legit encryption, not some made up encryption. I'll talk a little bit about encryption in a minute. You also want to make sure that if you are using one, the apps and browser plugins can be used on all your devices, and those can help you with logins both on your phone as well as on your work computer maybe and your tablet. So look for one that manages everything that you need it to. And then some also allow you to securely share passwords with others. So you can allow them the login access if they install the app or the browser plugin, but they can't see what the actual password is. It'll just let them log in. That can be helpful if you're sharing financial information with someone, or you have shared logins. Anyone that has combined finances with their partners, this is really helpful as well. Or just from an estate planning perspective, if something happens to you, someone else can have access to that information if they need it, and it's not just written down on your desk. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about multi-factor authentication. This is also called two-factor authentication. It's when you initiate some type of login on an account, and a lot of accounts and financial institutions are requiring the default for logging into anything uses either two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. So once you attempt to log in, a verification is sent to any number of methods that you choose. It could be a phone call where you get a code over an automated voice call. It could be a text message. It could be a push alert for anyone that's part of the University of Illinois. We use Duo Mobile, so you can download that app and get a push alert from the app to verify that you're trying to log into your student account, for instance. There might be a passcode where you set a passcode for future access, or something called a token or a key, where it's like a different physical device that you're able to push whenever you log in, or have it close by whenever you're trying to log into something to verify that it's you. And then once you get that verification, the access is granted or denied if you put in the wrong one. And that allows you to actually get into your account. So it's very helpful because it requires you to have a secondary device. So if someone steals like just your login information, unless they have your phone too, they're not going to be able to get into your bank account. So it's sometimes people think it's annoying, but it is helpful for protecting your information and especially your finances. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about encryption. This is a method of securing your data by making it a lot harder for other people to read it. So there's a large variety of encryption types and levels. Right now, the standard in the security field is a 128-bit system. Previously, there was a 40-bit and a 56-bit system, but the standard now is 128-bit. There's both symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption. Symmetric encryption uses the same key, the same kind of password for both encrypting the data and decrypting the data. Whereas asymmetric encryption uses a different key for encrypting the data and a completely different passcode or key to decrypt the data so you can get access to it again. And it's important when you're thinking about your financial information or your personal information and who you share it with. Most banks, militaries, and governments will use a 256-bit encryption. So if that number, the bit encryption, is lower, you might not want to trust it as much with your login information. All right, so another tool that we can use to try to protect our data and our traffic is called a virtual private network, or a VPN. This is an encrypted connection over the internet from a single device, like my phone, to a private network, which hides my traffic and provides a little bit of anonymity. It's often used in business and government to allow employees to work remotely to access the company's internal network in a secure way. So you don't see people prying into the data that they are trying to gather or work with. The National Security Agency, or NSA, strongly encourages use of either a corporate provided or personal VPN if you are ever using a public Wi-Fi, or one that lots of people would have access to that you wouldn't necessarily trust. So that's another tool in our tool chest for protecting our data. So some other ways to combat malware and protect our data is whenever we are surfing online, whenever we're making purchases online, we want to look for the lock symbol or the HTTPS. Make sure the S is in there for the URL. You also want to look for ways to install antivirus and anti-malware software on all your devices, not just your desktop computer, but if there's an opportunity to do it on your tablet, if you do a lot of things on your tablet related to finances or personal information, or on your phone, that's helpful as well. And like I said earlier, backing up your data regularly can also be really helpful for protecting against malware and other types of malicious scams and activities that might be taking your information or scraping your data from your devices. All right, so when you're looking at how to store your information securely. Something you might not think about as much is locking up your purse or wallet when you're at work. If you're not going to be around your workspace, you also want to lock your computer whenever it's unattended. Like typically you don't want to just leave your laptop in a Starbucks and then go to the bathroom, even if it's locked, right? You want to take your devices with you. But if you have to leave your private office, locking your computer is really helpful for protecting data. You also want to use possibly a locking file cabinet for important documents, either at home or at work, and then lock your phone. Using a PIN is a really helpful option. And I think it's important that we know that biometric data, where using your like thumbprint or your face, is not legally protected. There's not a lot of information out there about what your options are for biometric data, but a PIN is typically a more protection than biometric data, even if a lot of our devices are forcing us into like using Face ID or the convenience of a thumbprint in order to access your devices. So just something to keep in mind. Do whatever works best for you and keeps you protected as well as you can. All right, so let's talk a little bit about phishing, right? If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is, but you want to do your due diligence. You want to research it, especially if it's something you want to take advantage of. We don't want everyone to just be afraid of everything and not live your lives. But if something does sound too good to be true, but you're interested in learning more, don't be pressured to take action immediately. Take some time to research the organization or the phenomena that is being described as a really great opportunity for you. You also want to be skeptical of reviews. I know a lot of people say, look at the reviews, but the FTC mentioned that in 2020, the second most reported category for fraud was negative and false reviews. So that is something to be mindful of when you're doing your research. You also want to do a comparison shop, right? If something is being offered to you at a really good price, you might want to shop around and see if that's actually a good price for what you're getting, or if it's just hype around the marketing that's being provided to you or the person that's excited about it. And then if you're still confused, you might ask an expert for their opinion, just to get kind of the most information that you can get. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Nikki talking about what to do if you're a victim.
All right, so we've given you a lot of probably scary information. So what do you do? What do you do if this happens to you? Act fast. The faster you act, the quicker you could hopefully limit whatever damage the person inflicts. So record everything related to the issue. So make sure you write it down somewhere, take screenshots if you need it, put it in a safe place. Then place an initial fraud alert on your credit reports, which we'll talk a little bit more. Order your credit reports, and then you also create an identity theft report. All right, so what's the difference? There's fraud alerts and there's credit freezes. They are not interchangeable. They are different things. So a fraud alert means that businesses need to verify your identity before issuing any new credit. So if somebody wants to open up a new, buy a new or open up a new credit card, the bank would have to verify your identity. They can't just do it if there's a fraud alert on your identity. You could also have your extended fraud alert last up to 7 years, that's only available to identity theft victims. That could could prove very fruitful, because as we talked about way in the beginning, sometimes information is stolen, but then not made publicly available until later. So just something to keep in mind. And then a credit freeze means that it stops all access to your credit report until you yourself lift the freeze. So a freeze, anyone can do it. You don't have to just be a victim of identity theft. If you even think it before you can even verify anything, you could put that credit freeze on to stop any damages that could happen as you figure out what's going on. So the identity theft report recipe, the two things that you need an Federal Trade Commission identity theft affidavit and a police report. And together, those two things equal an identity theft report. By filing these identity theft reports, it allows you to have access to things like fraud alerts, etc. So after your identity theft report, you make sure you get copies of anything of the documents related to your identity theft, and make sure you get all fraudulent info removed from your credit report. This is super annoying. Same with 3, dispute fraudulent or inaccurate info on your credit report. I'm not going to lie. It's annoying because you have to call and you have to prove it, but it's worth it in the long run. And then make sure you stop a debt collector from contacting you. If somebody's calling you and you're like, this is not me, please stop calling. I don't owe you money. All right, so the FACT Act, this is an actual act that was passed, and these are your rights as a consumer. You get a free copy of your credit report every year. However, we're going to talk about this because that changed a little bit due to COVID-19, but no matter what, you are entitled to 1 free credit report each year. You have the right to place the fraud alert on your credit report for 90 days after that identity theft is confirmed. You can then request an extension, and businesses must contact you if there is a fraud alert on your report. So that is the law that needs to be followed concerning identity theft. All right, so weekly credit report access. Annualcreditreport.com. The 3 major credit bureaus are offering weekly online credit reports during the pandemic. This has been extended several times. So like first it was only going to be like till July of 2020, and then it kept, kind of like some of these other things, it keeps getting extended. So right now, it's still free. You could pull it weekly. The reason why this was made available is because identity theft that went way up during COVID-19. We don't know when this will stop. So, but annualcreditreport.com will have it at the top. When you go there, you could see if it's still available to pull for free every week. However, no matter what, because of the FACT Act, you get 1 free one every year. So that's something you should just get in the habit of doing, to review, to make sure that there's no potential fraudulent activity in your name.
I tend to do mine around tax season every year. That's kind of my habit. Let's do my annual credit report pull then. All right, so let's summarize this and put it in a nice bow. There are both behaviors and tools that you can use to protect yourself. Some of the behaviors include limit what you share, lock up your information or your physical devices or your wallet or your credit cards. Use strong passwords, passphrases, or PINs. You also want to be skeptical. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Shred documents with sensitive information. I tend to shred most of my documents just because I have a shredder. I might as well use it. You want to monitor accounts and your credit reports, just because you don't see fraudulent activity on your debit card or your credit card, doesn't mean that you're not a victim of identity theft, or you're not also monitoring your credit reports. You also want to act quickly if you do notice an issue to limit damages. Some of the tools that you can use are multi-factor or two-factor authentication, which is becoming a default for a lot of different accounts. You also could use a virtual private network, especially when you're on a public Wi-Fi, using the internet or working or studying. You also can install antivirus and anti-malware software on your devices. Using backup storage is really helpful as well. Backing up regularly, the more protection you have. Using paper shredders, I mentioned crosscut or micro cut shredders. Those are the best options for protecting your information. And then using password managers. And we also shared a resource called Have I Been Pwned, just to see if your email addresses or phone numbers now have showed up in data breaches. I know a lot of you are very hungry or you need to go places, so we'll try to wrap this up very quickly. Our next webinar is on October 27th, and it's on What's Your Job Worth? We're going to be talking about different benefits to pay attention to and how to leverage your employment to accomplish your financial goals or other goals. You can watch some of our previous webinars on YouTube. This particular webinar is also being recorded and will be placed on YouTube once it is completely rendered. And then if you do have any questions, we will stick around for a little bit, but feel free to hop off if you need to. And you can stay in contact with all of the facilitators and coordinators for Get Savvy. And we send out all of our information to the registrants of these webinars. So now we will answer some questions. Feel free to log off. We will share the recording when it's available. All right, so for those of you that have been in the chat, are there any big questions that we missed that we should address? Yes, thank you everyone for attending. Have a fabulous day. Is using a personal hotspot a secure solution instead of public Wi-Fi? So with a personal hotspot, as far as I understand, it's similar to using a private Wi-Fi. However, you need to make sure that it is password protected. Some of them you can make open. And I'm not an expert on this. I'm married to someone who who is very much into cybersecurity, because he even insists that we use VPN at home sometimes on our private network, just to it hides traffic from people. It provides some anonymity. So even if someone was able to access our private Wi-Fi, they wouldn't necessarily be able to see our traffic. So it really depends on how scared you are of people seeing your internet traffic.
I see a question. Do items with name and address on them only need to be shredded or okay to recycle with papers? I shred everything that has my name on it or in my name and address. Even if it's just, sometimes I don't like shred them, but I like rip it apart at least, just because you never know. And then put that in the recycling bin.
And I'm old enough to remember phone books, so I don't rip up name and address.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing because it is kind of public information. Your address and name is kind of public information. So it really depends on what other information is in the document as to whether or not I will shred it.
I think my husband and I just got into the habit of doing it, so now we just do it.
Yeah,
I mean that makes sense if it's easy. I just think it's one of those things, if you have to prioritize time, that to me isn't the highest priority.
Yeah.
Selena asked a question that I don't think we've answered, and this one might be easier with voice, about that she's been notified that her email is in dark web, and she's not sure if this is identity theft related. One of you want to take that, or do you want me?
So I mean, email addresses are kind of just out there everywhere. It really depends on what other information it is posted with, but I think most of our email addresses are on the dark web in some way. The Have I Been Pwned website is really helpful for identifying what information was possibly released in whatever data breaches your email pops up in. And that particular website also expanded the search to include phone numbers because of the Facebook hack that happened in 2018. Because originally it was just part of the data did not include email addresses, but instead all of people's names, addresses, banking information, and their phone numbers were in the data set, but not their email. So they expanded the search to include phone numbers and email. Thank you, Brooke, for sharing that resource again. I'm glad everyone got value out of today's webinar. We'll go ahead and shut it down, but if you do have any questions, feel free to email studentmoney@uillinois.edu and we'll try to get an answer to your question. And we'll try to get this webinar recording and all of the documentation and PDF of the slides, as well as all of the links that we shared out by next week. So hopefully we'll help out there.